Friends, let me first of all share some very cool news with you, because my Beethoven vlogs are selected and programmed for the Beethoven Festival online, organized by the Concertgebouw Amsterdam and the Royal Concertgebouw Orchestra coming week. Apart from 5 of my Beethoven vlogs, they'll be broadcasting all the Beethoven symphonies performed by the Royal Concertgebouw Orchestra, conducted by Ivan Fischer. Well, it doesn't get any better than that, does it? Well, actually it does, because this is episode 42 of Beethoven 250 in 52 posts, in which we will talk about the Symphony of Symphonies, the 9th, Ode to Joy. Beethoven's 9th Symphony is the last symphony he completed, and it has achieved a mythical status. If you only say the 9th, every music lover will understand that you mean this piece, this particular 9th Symphony by Beethoven. Musicians, musicologists and music lovers all agree that it is one of Beethoven's greatest masterworks, and some even say that it is the biggest achievement in all the history of music. And therefore UNESCO has added the manuscript to their Memory of the World Program Heritage list. Quite something. And just like the music itself, the history of the piece is legendary too. It had taken Beethoven 10 years after writing his 8th symphony to complete another. The 9th symphony was written between 1823 and 1824. Quite fast, in only about 9 months of time, but Beethoven had been thinking about it for a very, very long time already. Now, when the symphony was finished, it was still a huge effort to organize the premiere at the Kerkner-Tor Theatre on May 7th, 1824. Because writing a symphony is one thing, preparing it for performance is another. To do so, you need copyists. At least in Beethoven's time, you needed people who could copy the manuscript and write out all the parts for all the different instruments. I mean, you didn't have any copy machines, right? But besides that, Beethoven had terrible handwriting, so it was a huge job for those copyists, especially because Beethoven was watching them all the time, fighting with them all the time, because obviously the copyists made mistakes and it made Beethoven furious. But besides, he needed a huge orchestra for it, plus a choir, plus 4 soloists, which he all had to discuss and agree on with the concert organizers. They had to assemble almost every professional musician in Vienna to form the biggest symphony orchestra ever, to perform the biggest symphony ever, conducted by the biggest composer ever. Because yes, it was announced that Beethoven would conduct the premiere of his 9th symphony. Or as a matter of fact, they put it this way, he would take part in conducting the 9th symphony. You have to realize Beethoven was completely deaf at the time and he hadn't performed in public for over 12 years. So that was a big thing. But you had to be realistic. He wasn't really able to do so. So they came up with the following idea. 3 conductors were conducting the premiere of the 9th Symphony. Beethoven stood behind the conductor to show all the emotions and all the expressiveness he wanted in the music. The conductor, Michael Umlauf, was actually waving the baton. and Ignác Šupancic was standing in between the musicians to guide them through the music. It is said that Beethoven was conducting with so much passion and so much energy that he looked like a madman. But it would become one of his very, very biggest successes in life. Already after the second movement of the symphony, the audience was applauding and cheering the composer and his music. Beethoven didn't realize that because he didn't notice it. He was completely deaf. And one of the soloists had to turn him around to show him the audience that was so full of admiration for him and his music. They were waving their hands and their handkerchiefs and throwing their hats into the air. Already after the second movement, and still the big finale had to come. The big finale of the Ninth Symphony is what the piece is all about. All is directed towards that joyful finale. All of a sudden the choir explodes into this song on a poem by Friedrich Schiller, Ode to Joy. Alle Menschen werden Brüder. All people will be brothers, will be united. Beethoven already got acquainted with that poem in 1795 and he wanted to put it on music, but he didn't do so. At least we don't have a score of it anymore. And in later years he also had several plans to work on Ode to Joy, but he didn't do so until 1822 when he changes the course of history, of music history, by adding it to the Ninth Symphony. No other symphony has had such a big impact on the world as the Ninth Symphony of Beethoven. Ode to Joy has become an international symbol of brotherhood. It has been chosen as the national anthem of Europe, and it also has influenced the size of a CD, because when the CD was invented, one of the criteria was that Beethoven's Ninth Symphony would fit on a CD. But instead of listening to a CD, you can enjoy it as a live stream this week on the social media accounts of the Concertgebouw Amsterdam and the Royal Concertgebouw Orchestra. Because they have organized the Beethoven Festival online, which will start on Monday. Every day they will be broadcasting a symphony by Beethoven, conducted by Ivan Fischer and played by the Royal Concertgebouw Orchestra. They will have some interviews broadcasted and also some of my Beethoven vlogs, which I'm very happy about. So a big shout out to the Concertgebouw, big shout out to the Concertgebouw Orchestra. Do follow their accounts to follow the Beethoven Festival online. If you enjoy my series, please support it by a donation, subscribe to my channels to keep following my videos, and see you next week.